I'm making a language. It's called Tome, which is an homage to how much I love books. It's also the same word as the pronoun for we in the language, Tome, because I see it as a language for people, for connecting people. As a linguist, I study language as a way to tell stories and connect people across cultural barriers. So I see this language as a project for me to connect people in the future, because it is a lot of work and it's nowhere near done. I'm making it for 3 reasons. 1, I want to get a sleeve tattoo with concentric rings, black work, and in between the concentric rings, I want to have runes. But the problem with that is that all runes that exist right now are either currently or will probably be converted into hate symbols by hate groups. Like the Norse runic Futhark is now being used by alt-right supremacists. So the thing with this is that if I make my own runic alphabet, I can put it on my arm. It'll only have value to me until more people use it, which brings us to the second reason. I'm making this language for my future family. I want to raise my kids as polyglots, so I think it would be really cool if I made a language just for us, something that I would teach them that very few people would know, so that we could all connect with each other and have this kind of like secret way of communication. I think that'd be really cool. And 3, I'm making it for the book that I'm making, The Wanderer's Guide to Dromknost. Dromknost is a fictional D&D setting that I'm making. It's the same setting that I'm creating all of these subclasses for. Right now I have the Blood Pact bundle out, I have the Truthspeaker Ancients bundle out, and coming up next, soon to be released, is the Polychromatic Rush bundle, which is all about color. So for this book, I want it to be a mixture of art book, I want it to be a D&D setting book, I want it to have class options, subclass options, I want it to have familiars, I want it to have poetry, I want it to have language, I want it to be cultural, I want it to be an art book, I want it to be multi-purpose, something that's a project, something that I can be really proud of, something that I'm working on very hard. This language, it is still very much in its early stages, and I'm working on it in kind of an unconventional way. I started on it pretty conventionally. I worked on the phonemes first, the sounds of the language, and then I figured out the grammar, the word order, and then I figured out what sounds go together and what don't, and the lexicon, which is what I'm currently working on, the words in the language. But the issue with what I'm doing right now is that since the language is such a big project, I'm still very much in the early stages, but I need to use it for the runes on the subclass options that I've been writing. You can see it in the header and footer for each subclass that I've released. Those are all original phrases in the language, but since I'm creating the lexicon for the content of subclasses for a fantasy D&D setting, the words that I'm creating first are very strange words, like arcane strike or homunculus, things like that. So they're not the standard words that you would use in a language. Like there's this book, the Jiffy German phrase book. This book is something that I've used to learn German. It's also something that I've used to create languages in the past. It has, it's like a phrase book, so it's really basic language, but it's got everything that you need, the basics that you need to go to Germany or another German-speaking country and survive, basically. So it has basic grammar, it has basic vocabulary, things like that. If I were to do this language right, I would just start off with the lexicon in this book. But I'm working on it for a fantasy setting, so I'm making fantasy words first. More on the fantasy setting next.
We are out in nature, my friends. Hello. Today I will be talking about some bundles that I've created, some subclass bundles for 5e. First off, this one's been released for about a week now. It's the Blood Pact bundle. It includes 6 subclasses of Hemocraft-based magics and other martial abilities. First off, there's the Hemocrafter Artificer, which is all about using healer's kits as a tool to siphon life and redistribute it as the artificer pleases. There's the Druid Circle of Blood, which has 3 sub-archetypes that you can use instead of Wild Shape, that you use to emulate the qualities of nature's most deadly predators. I hope they don't come and get me now, because I'm out in nature, my friends. Yes. For those 3 sub-archetypes, there is the Hardened Carapace, which is all about increasing your physical durability. There's the Fluid Form, and there's the Feasting Jaws. Fluid Form is all about making yourself more acrobatic and limber. You can even fit through holes that are as small as an inch across. And Feasting Jaws is kind of like a bat or a vampire. In my previous campaign that just finished with the quarter, 2 of my players actually play tested this same subclass, the Druid Circle of Blood. One of them used the Fluid Form primarily, which was just hilarious. There was this person and they were being attacked, and then all of a sudden they would like slump down to the ground in a puddle of clothes and liquid flesh, I guess. Sounds disgusting, but it was really funny in game. And the other one was a Dampier who used the Feasting Jaws to simulate kind of like a vampiric curse. There's also the Fighter Battlefield Medic, which is all about mixing magical and non-magical healing with the use of healer's kits. There's the Paladin Oath of Blood, which is also kind of like the Hemocrafter Artificer. It's all about redistributing vitality, but also they have this channel divinity called Infectious Armament, where you can infuse your weapon with infectious power, so that once per turn when you hit an enemy with a weapon, you can force them to make a con save, and if they fail, they're poisoned until the end of your next turn, which is really cool. There's the Ranger Witch Knight Conclave, which is all about using dark magic to breach the limits of reality. Like Dromknost, this setting that I've created, is all about magic as a force of nature. So Rangers are warriors of nature. They are combatants that fight alongside forces of nature. And so in Dromknost, it only makes sense that there would be Rangers who study and practice and coexist with magic as a force of nature. You get Cursed Strikes, where they can impose certain debuffs on enemies when they hit them with weapon attacks. They also get Sanguine Recall, where you can harm yourself, dealing necrotic damage that can't be resisted, and then you get a spell slot back, a 1st to 5th level. Finally, with the Blood Pact bundle, the Wizard School of Hemomancy, because of course, the most ancient form of magic, Hemomancy, or rather, the art of the heart. A friend of mine that I was working to create these playtest subclasses with, he really liked some of the subclasses I wrote that had more options, because subclasses are all about options. They're creating options for a player to make their character different mechanically than a character who's the same class but a different subclass. And so with some of my subclasses that I've written, there are even more options. Like the Druid Circle of Blood, there are 3 transmute flesh forms that use your wild shape that are varied, and that creates even more options. So with the Wizard School of Hemomancy, there are 3 sub-archetypes. There's the Mender, which is all about healing. Then there is the Sawbones, which is all about using martial weapons to deal damage. They also get natural armor based off of their intelligence modifier. And then there's the Body Man, which is all about the art of possession. So you can actually possess a creature that you can see within range and cause them to do certain things with their reaction. More nature, but I have to be careful because of spiders. The next bundle that I released is called the Truthspeaker Ancients bundle, which has only 3 subclasses. It has the Barbarian Path of the Skald, which is kind of like mixing a bard with a barbarian. They gain access to ritual magic. They gain access to the legend lore spell. They also have 3 sub-archetypes that they can choose from when they enter a rage. You get to choose it at 3rd level, and then you get to keep that throughout the length of your career as a Skald. There's the Warrior, which gains temporary HP when you enter your rage. There's the Monster, which increases you to size large when you enter a rage. And there's the Gods, where it changes all of your weapon damage to radiant damage. Next up is the Cleric Rite domain. This is all about using ritual magic. They gain a feature called Grimoire of the Ritualist, where they gain 2 ritual spells from any spell list, first level, that they can cast only as rituals. Their domain spells are a mixture of dark magic and ritual magic. So each level that you gain domain spells, there's 1 ritual spell and then there's 1 dark magic spell. For example, at first level, you gain access to this ritual spell called Fateful Naming, which I had to make because Ceremony is not in the system's reference document for 5e. So I have to make some spells originally, and I'm actually pretty pleased with how Fateful Naming came out. It has buffs that you can use once per character that you can affect willing creatures with. Within 24 hours, they gain 1 of, I think, 6 benefits. Some favorites is Voice of the Voiceless, where you can actually make a beast be able to speak and understand any languages that the caster knows for 24 hours. And then there's also Cleaver, where within 24 hours once, a creature affected by the spell can add +10 to an attack roll with a weapon attack, ensuring a mighty blow. They also gain access to martial weapon proficiency, the Cleric Rite domain, because though this is all about dark magic and being a hermit and protecting your sacred hearth with magic, there are few things I acknowledge that can't also be fixed with a good whack. A stick, or a sword, or a battle axe, anything like that. Finally, there's the Wizard School of Onomancy, which is the school of wizardry that focuses on the art of naming. So you can discern a cognomen, a name of a creature, using an insight check against a certain DC. And if you get that cognomen, if you beat the DC, then you can write down the name of a creature. It can be a true name, it can be their regular name, it can be a handful of adjectives that aptly describe them. You can write those names in your spellbook to remember it for later use. Then you can invoke cognomens a certain amount of times per short or long rest equal to your proficiency bonus. The first things that you get at 2nd level are Writer's Ward, where you can gain advantage on a saving throw as a reaction by erasing 1 of the cognomens from your spellbook. Then there's Sightless Mark, where you can affect the creature with a spell if they're in range, but even if they're invisible, you can't see them. If they're behind cover, you can still affect them with it. Later on, you get other ways to invoke cognomens. At 10th level, you get Call of the Named Ones, where you can invoke a cognomen as an action and gain the spectral ally of a creature whose cognomen you know to fight alongside you in battle. And then later on, there's other things that you can use with cognomens and other things. We are back in the Sanctum Sanctorum amongst the books, and there are some things that I'd like to ask all of you. I've been working really hard to make the subclasses, to work on the campaign setting, to make the language, all of this, and I would really appreciate it if you purchased a subclass. They're all on sale right now. I understand that they're a bit more expensive, more pricey than the things that you might find on DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG, but I can assure you, and as you probably can tell from this video, that the subclasses that I've written are of a higher quality than your average homebrew subclass. They are something that's thriving with creativity and originality, but they're also really well balanced and they're just fun to play. And I'm really proud of them, so if you could give it a try, just let me know. If you purchase them and use them in your games, send me a tweet or send me an email. You can find me on Twitter at @the_halfcakes, or my email address for my business is mkb@findingmason.com. I would love to hear about all of it. If you can't find it in your hearts to buy a subclass, completely understandable, but if you can, if you could share this video, if you can share my Instagram post, if you can share the reels, if you could just tell all of your D&D friends, all of your fantasy friends, all of your RPG friends about the work that I'm doing here, I would really appreciate it. It would mean the world to me. Thanks, y'all.